It's so hard to show everybody just how much is actually wrong with this particular system because there's many different areas that it splinters off in. Dr. Baskerville, let me ask you, how big is the domestic violence industry?
Ooh, I couldn't give you figures, but it's huge. I would be very surprised. I don't think there are any figures because the striking thing about domestic violence, I mean, you hear these statistics, about how horrible all these women being beaten and killed, and then the men's groups come back and say, yes, but there's a lot of men that are being beaten and killed also, which is true. Um, but in fact, there's no real reliable statistics on either one because there's no definition of domestic violence. I mean, you look at the definitions of domestic violence, official definitions of domestic violence from places like the Justice Department or the British Home Office, and it includes things like shouting or insults or calling names or what they call psychological violence or economic violence. It's meaningless. There are no reliable statistics on how much. And the thing is, domestic violence is not adjudicated like a crime. It's not. You can't say you hear about so many incidents of domestic violence, but they're not based on convictions in legal cases or jury trials. They're based on reports. And reports don't mean anything. Reports can be false. Reports can be can be groundless. So there's no reliable statistics. The same is true of child abuse, by the way. There's no reliable statistics on child abuse because they're all based on reports. And the reports, and even if a report is said to be confirmed, it's not confirmed by a trial. So you can't say this was a true case of domestic violence or child abuse because this man was convicted or this family or this woman was convicted. You can't say that because for the most part, they're not adjudicated that way. Nobody's convicted. So the statistics are completely meaningless. And nobody knows because it's again an example of legal nihilism. The figures, the statistics, it's all made up, and it's made up mostly by ideologues.
How closely related is CPS, the domestic violence industry, and the family courts? How well are those three things connected?
Oh, they're very closely connected. Yeah, I mean, all of them. I mean, the whole child abuse industry, the CPS, the Child Protective Services. They're all linked in very close with the family courts, and they all have a mutual interest in the mutual interest in several things. First of all, the removal of the father. That's always the first. That's always the first principle in divorce, in domestic violence, child abuse. The first thing they do, remove the father, because as long as the father is there, as long as the family is intact, they have no jurisdiction. They have no reason to exist. So the first thing that has to be done is the father has to be removed, and that's usually the job of the courts to remove the father. They say it's temporary. Just till we sort this out, the father should leave the family. But once the father's gone, then the burden of proof is on the father to get back in, and he never happens, very seldom. So. And sometimes once the father's out, even if the mother doesn't want the father out, they can remove the father, and then they can, then the mother's alone. Sometimes they threaten the mother if she doesn't take out a restraining order and get the father kicked out. They'll take the children away from her, and then sometimes they do that after they remove the father, either at the request of the mother or against her will. Then they'll remove the children from the mother as well. So it's the whole thing is to break the family up. They have no. The courts, the lawyers, the judges, the social workers, they have no reason to exist as long as the family is intact. So that's the first thing they do: get rid of the father, fabricate the accusations without any debase the standards of evidence. So there's no objective criteria for what constitutes a real domestic case of domestic violence or a real case of child abuse. So debase the standards to subjective judgments that we control, and then the courts become and the social workers become like miniature gendarmes. They become the accusers, the prosecutors, the judges, and the juries.